Gopi Jana Palapa Giri Paratari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Palapa Giri Paratari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Palapa Giri Paratari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 64, and there are two texts, 43 and 44. So 43 is on the board. Brahmanarto hi aparito hartaram patayati aha ajanantam apihi enam Nigram Brahmana Kor Iva Brahmanarto hi aparito Hartaram Patayati Aha Ajanantam apihi enam Nigram Brahmana Kor Iva Brahmanarto hi aparito Hartaram Patayati Aha Ajanantam apihi enam Nigram Brahmana Kor Iva. Please chant. Brahmanarto hi aparito Hataram patayati aha Ajanantam apihi enam Nigram Brahmana Kor Iva. Brahmanarto hi aparito Hartaram patayati aha Ajanantam apihi enam Nigram Brahmana Kor Iva. Thank you very much. The word for word, Brahmana, of a Brahmana. Artha, the property. He, indeed. Aparita, taken away. Hartaram, the taker. Patayati, causes to fail. Aha, down. Ajanantam, unaware. Api, even. He, indeed. Edam, this person. Nigram, King Nirga. Brahmana, of the Brahmana. Gau, the cow. Eva, as. And the translation for text 43 is as follows. When a Brahmana's property is stolen, even unknowingly, it certainly causes the person who takes it to fall down, just as the Brahmana's cow did to Nirga. So that's Krishna speaking, and here's the purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. The Lord here demonstrates that his instructions are not theoretical, but practical. as seen completely in the case of Nirga Maharaj. And the following text 44, Evam Vishravya Bhagavan Mukundo Dvarakakashaham Pavana Sarvalokanam Viveshanija Mandiram. And the translation for text 44. Having thus instructed the residents of Dwarka, Lord Mukunda, purifier of all the worlds, entered his palace. So that ends this chapter in the 10th canto. And so we'll be looking at these two verses. And there's a very short commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on the first of the texts, the one on the board, text 43. So the commentary has Srila Vishwanath saying the following. So these are his words. So he's repeating what Lord Krishna has said, just wording it differently. This is not an exaggeration to instill fear. There is direct proof, as stated in this verse. What is not an exaggeration, I should pause. So he's commenting. So these are his words. This is not an exaggeration to instill fear. There is direct proof, as stated in this verse. So that's the commentary. So what is not being exaggerated is Lord Krishna's statement that when a Brahmana's property is stolen, even unknowingly, it causes the person who takes it to fall down. So that's what Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is commenting, that this is not an exaggeration. And Srila Prabhupada puts this statement of Lord Krishna, the one that we read, that even if, read it directly, when a Brahmana's property is stolen even unknowingly, it certainly causes the person who takes it to fall down, just as the Brahmana's cow did to Nirga. So Srila Prabhupada puts the statement of Lord Krishna in the following words. So this is Srila Prabhupada, as though Krishna's talking. You should learn from the example of King Nirga, that even if someone unknowingly usurps the property of a Brahmana, he's put into a miserable condition of life. Close quote. So sometimes when one says something, other people may doubt it or even not believe one. And so one has to back up what one is saying with reasons. So here, that's precisely what's happening. The backup of Lord Krishna's statement is through the example of King Nirga. So that stealing of a Brahmana's property is narrated. We find it in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here is how the narration goes. So the king continues. So this is the narration that Lord Krishna is giving cows, or he's narrating to Lord Krishna the giving of cows in charity. King Nirga is doing the narration. So the king continues. This is how it's put in Krishna book. So these are his words. In spite of all of this, unfortunately, one of the Brahmana's cows that I had given in charity chanced to enter amongst my other cows. Not knowing this, I again gave it in charity to another Brahmana. As the cow was being led away by the Brahmana, The former master claimed it as his own, stating, "This cow was formerly given to me. So how is it that you are taking it away?" So this is the scenario. The king is narrating this to Lord Krishna of how the problem happened. So he's recounting. So these are his words. So here's the Brahmana. As the cow has been led away by this Brahmana, the former master, because it had previously been given to somebody else, the former master claimed it as his own, saying, "This cow was formerly given to me. So how is it that you are taking it away?" He's addressing the second Brahmana. Thus there was arguing and fighting between the two Brahmanas. And they came before me, King Nirga's talking, and charged that I had taken back a cow. I had previously given in charity. So this incident marked that usurping of the property of a Brahmana. So that was the scenario. Where this whole problem happened, this usurping of the property of a Brahmana. So this is what Srila Prabhupada writes. To give something to someone and then to take it back is considered a great sin, especially in dealing with Brahmanas. Many years ago, I was doing a teaching project in a little African village outside of Johannesburg. And it was a defined time period, like a 6-month time period. I was doing a special philosophy for children project. And on the last day that I was there, the two class teachers of these children told all the children that they had to give me something. So I was a little embarrassed, but anyway, I thought, okay, I mean, it's probably to their benefit. So, all the children bring something to school from home that, is kind of precious to them. So somebody may bring like 2 extra sweets and they're saving it for their lunchtime, or somebody decides to actually processes the instruction and they make a sketch that they're giving as a gift. And it was quite an interesting little setting because there was a bull-driven watering system that they had, because part of the project also involved cultivating some land, some agriculture. So the children were getting to see a lot of things. And anyway, in that sense, shy, but I thought, okay, the teachers have asked them to do this, they're going to do it. So, somebody gives me their precious sweet, somebody gives me a little sketch. Somebody writes a note of thank you for teaching us or something. So they're all small children. So anyway, a little bit of time passes, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And in exchange, I had bought a whole bunch of I knew what was their favorite sweets. So I bought a whole bunch. So in return, I gave them sweets. So 10, 15 minutes pass. And 2 little girls come and they say, "Can we have it? Can we have what we gave you?" So, I had to laugh. And, it's a funny thing because even though one may not be wanting necessarily what one is given, it's still the act of generosity on the part of the other person. So when it's actually taken back, it's like you withdrawing that generosity. So I sort of experienced it in a small form, even though it was children. Anyway, it was only 2 girls that came to ask for something back. So anyway, this is Srila Prabhupada saying that actually it's considered a sin, a great sin, to actually take back something that was given to someone, especially if you're dealing with a Brahmana. So now, the emphasis on the sin incurred by taking something back that's given to a Brahmana is related to the qualities by which the Brahmanas work. So there has to be some distinguishing feature of why it makes it a sin to actually take back something from a Brahmana that was given to a Brahmana. So the qualities by which the Brahmanas work are given by Lord Krishna, and these are being peaceful, self-controlled, austere, pure, tolerant, honest, knowledgeable, wise, and religious. So very extraordinary qualities. And that's from Bhagavad Gita 1842. So it's very commendable persons in society, the Brahmanas, because they will not cheat and steal or lie. That's one of the things. They were said to be very honest. Um, so they, in fact, came, as I read that scenario, they had expressed in a very straightforward manner to King Nirga that he had taken back a cow that he had previously given in charity. They expressed it very clearly. So that quality of honesty is very apparent. Because they could have kept quiet about it. The one Brahmana could have cheated the other Brahmana if those were the regular qualities. But because Brahmanas have that quality of honesty and peacefulness, they can very calmly let it be known what the situation is that's transpired. And that is what these two Brahmanas had done with King Nirga. They had calmly told him, both of them said, you've taken back a cow that you had previously given in charity. So on the part of King Nirga, Srila Prabhupada describes, so this is Srila Prabhupada's description. The cows he had given in charity were not ordinary cows. Each one was very young and had given birth to only one calf. They were full of milk, very peaceful and healthy. All the cows were purchased with money earned legally. Furthermore, their horns were gold-plated, their hooves were bedecked with silver plating, and they were covered with necklaces and with silken wrappers embroidered with pearls. The king stated that these valuably decorated cows had not been given to worthless persons, but had been distributed to first-class Brahmanas, whom he had also decorated with nice garments and gold ornaments. So the Brahmanas were well qualified. That's the point. He was giving, the charity was being given to very well qualified persons. And the other point that's made about them is that they were not rich, these Brahmanas. Their family members were always in want for the necessities of life. So the picture that's painted of the recipients of charity, of the charity of King Nirga, fall into this category of austere Brahmanas, because was the other quality by which the Brahmanas work. Because you're hearing about how their families were always wanting for the necessities of life. So they were showing, actually, you can infer that they were showing strict self-discipline, meaning that they were, again, worthy recipients of charity. So Srila Prabhupada gives the criterion that needs to be met for a qualified Brahmana. And this is what he says. A real Brahmana never hoards money for a luxurious life, like the Kshatriyas or Vaishyas, but always keeps himself poverty-stricken. So it's a deliberate thing, knowing that money diverts the mind to materialistic ways of life. So we just heard the king knew what condition the families were in. He knew the Brahmanas were not rich. And then we're understanding that actually, according to the qualities by which the Brahmanas work, this is a deliberate thing to actually be very austere. It's very deliberate, and to be so self-disciplined. Um, it's a deliberate thing to remain poverty-stricken. So to live in this way, it's the vow of a qualified Brahmana. So all these Brahmanas were well situated in that exalted vow. So conversely, there's the Kshatriya. And the Kshatriya has to operate with qualities that are natural to him. And in that societal division of the Kshatriyas, there's the quality that's very prominent is generosity. And in particular, this was displayed by King Nirga. And of course, there are other qualities of work for the Kshatriya, such as being heroic, having power, being determined, being resourceful, having courage in battle, and showing leadership. So those are qualities for the Kshatriya. Now, this quality of generosity in particular, which is one of the hallmarks for the functioning or the work by which the quality that permeates the work that the Kshatriya is doing, it was clearly shown by King Nirga, because this is what he says of himself. I gave in charity as many cows as there are grains of sand on the earth, stars in the heavens, or drops of rain in a rain shower. So clearly, it was innumerable, the number of cows he gave in charity. So he would certainly qualify for working with that quality of generosity. So, of course, that particular statement that he made came earlier on in this canto in the 12th verse. So, in addition, there's the quality of nobility that the Kshatriya has to have. And this is seen in his stating, I gave them cows, land, gold, and houses, along with horses, elephants, and marriageable girls with maidservants, as well as sesame, silver, fine beds, clothing, jewels, furniture, and chariots. So this is very clear that there's this quality of nobility in King Nirga. So he doesn't merely perform the Vedic ritual of giving cows to the Brahmanas, but his nobility extends to covering all aspects of their life. He's a highly noble person, so then he includes things such as houses for them, land, even considers their marriage status and provides marriageable partners, even considers them having some wealth, so provides silver. So he says, I performed Vedic sacrifices and executed various pious welfare activities. So even separate from his pious activities and Vedic sacrifices, his nobility extended to providing all these extra, or you could say complete caretaking kind of necessities for the Brahmanas. Now, one can examine Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, where he says it's not an exaggeration what Krishna has just said. That when a Brahmana's property is stolen, even unknowingly, it causes a person who takes it to fall down. So just as the Brahmana's cow did to King Nirga, that was the comments or the instruction Lord Krishna was giving to his family members. So this fall down that happened to King Nirga, because you could say it was unknowingly that a cow in the herd that he'd previously given in charity, then actually he gave again in charity, not knowing that that cow was present. So unknowingly, he had made this error. And this is how he describes it. When both Brahmanas charged, this is This is Srila Prabhupada. When both Brahmanas charged the king with the same complaint, he was simply puzzled as to how it had happened. Thereafter, with great humility, the king offered each of them 100,000 cows in exchange for the one cow that was causing the fight between them. He prayed to them that he was their servant and that there had been some mistake. So he's taken a position of great humility, and you can see his resourcefulness. He immediately thinks of a solution to the problem. Okay, in exchange for this one cow, each of you can receive 100,000 cows. So in order to rectify the error, he prayed that they be very kind upon him and accept his offer in exchange for that one cow. The king fervently appealed to the Brahmanas. Notice, it's fervent. He's praying. He's appealing to them. So the king fervently appealed to the Brahmanas not to cause his downfall into hell because of this mistake. So he understood what would be the consequence. He's a highly noble person. He's very much understanding the Vedic ritualistic processes, and he's deeply concerned about the error. So there's a statement that comes in the Parasara Smriti, and Srila Prabhupada quotes it. So I didn't look up the Parasara Smriti, but Srila Prabhupada quotes it. And he quotes it in Bhagavad Gita 2:32, where this is what it says about the Kshatriya. The Kshatriya's duty is to protect the citizens from all kinds of difficulties. And for that reason, he has to apply violence in suitable cases for law and order. Therefore, he has to conquer the soldiers of inimical kings, and thus with religious principles he should rule over the world. So notice the emphasis put on ruling, abiding by religious principles. And the religious principle at play here is actually Manu's law. And this is that law of Manu that is in play in this scenario that's happened. A Brahmana's property is called Brahmasva. It cannot be acquired even by the government. Recently, in one of the classes, there was mention made, I believe it was His Holiness Ramapada Swami, that in India there had been some situation where the government decided that deity storerooms, all the jewels, etc., should become the property of the government. And there was a huge court case, and the conclusion was that no, that all that jewelry, the valuables, were the property of the deity. It couldn't be claimed by the government, and that is the correct understanding. So it can't be claimed by the government. So it's Manu's law that's operating here. The property of a Brahmana is Brahmasva. It cannot be taken even by the government. So both Brahmanas insisted that the cow was theirs, because in each case, they're operating with that quality of honesty. So each one says, the king gave this cow to me in charity. So each of them says it because he did. And each of them said, you can't take back the cow under any condition. Each of them said it, which is correct. It's according to Manu's law. So both of them, adhering to that law, both of them did not agree to exchange that one cow for the 100,000 cows. So they were quite inflexible in the whole matter. that meant that King Nirga was put into a problem because it meant that he was not able to protect the Brahmana's property. That's what it came down to. The property of the first Brahmana, you could say, had been taken by the second Brahmana, or King Nirga had taken that, you could say, because he was still responsible for that cow. He had taken that cow and then given it to the second one, which meant that he had failed to protect the property of the first Brahmana. So it was after this incident of the cow that the fall down of King Nirga took place. And that's what Lord Krishna is instructing to his family members, that there's a fall down even if unknowingly one takes back the property of a Brahmana given in charity. So when the time came for the king to give up his body, he was taken before Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, and he was asked whether he first wanted to enjoy the results of his pious activities or whether he wanted to suffer the results of his impious activities. Now, Lord Krishna's statement to his sons becomes plausible because that's one of the things. If you make a statement, people may doubt that it can happen. So in the case of Lord Krishna, he said, here's the example of King Nirga. So I've tried to paint the whole picture of what transpired with King Nirga. And so Krishna's statement now really becomes plausible because it describes the downfall of King Nirga, apparent his downfall. Because Yamaraj, he hints to that in fact he's talking to King Nirga when he's left his body and he's now come into Yamaraj's abode. And in fact, I think from a previous class, although King Nirga had been very fearful that he was going to go into a filthy hell, so, the worst hell that Yamaraj oversees or is a superintendent of, but in fact, actually, he didn't go into a filthy hell. It was another abode, the Manasa, that's on the Manasa, that is Yamaraj's abode. And it was in that place that Yamaraj said he gave a hint to the king. He basically said he doesn't know the limit of the king's future enjoyment, because we heard the extreme generosity by which the king had been operating. So practically there would be no end to the king's material happiness, because that's the result of that pious activity and his having worked with such generosity. So Srila Prabhupada writes this. So these are Srila Prabhupada's words. But the king, bewildered, decided to first suffer the results of his impious activities and then to accept the merit of his pious activities. So a very responsible person, noble person. If he's done wrong, rather let him suffer that consequence first. Therefore, Yamaraj immediately turned him into a lizard. And in the Bhagavatam, it's put that as King Nirga was falling from that abode, he actually saw his body transforming into a lizard. So that was Srila Prabhupada from Krishna book. So King Nirga came to remain in the well as a big lizard for a very long time. So that was the fall down, the result of that one moment of an impious activity, that he could not protect the property of a Brahmana, and had also wanted to take back, or you could say had taken back, even though it was inadvertently, that cow acted as that vehicle that put King Nirga into the situation of performing something impious. The property of a Brahmana was taken back. So on two counts, there was impiety. So one can conclude that Lord Krishna's reasoning, when he's actually making this statement to his family members, it was good reasoning, because there's direct proof in the case of King Nirga falling down for having stolen a Brahmana's property and of having failed to protect a Brahmana's property. So 2 counts. And so it was that Lord Krishna, having instructed the residents of Dwarka, and that's the translation, purifier of all the worlds, entered his palace. So just the fact that Lord Krishna is referred to in the 2nd verse of today and the last verse of this chapter as the purifier of all the worlds, we can consider one very interesting comment that Srila Prabhupada makes, and this is his comment. That subject matter that helps us purify our constitutional position is especially Krishna. Similarly, the living entity who's inquisitive to understand Vedic principles is also part and parcel of Krishna. So we've been trying to study this Vedic principle, and trying to understand it. So just by virtue of the fact that we're inquisitive on this matter, we're trying to understand it, it's reminding us that we are part and parcel of Krishna. So it's sort of like practically in action, just going through this and trying to understand this Vedic principle that was enunciated by Krishna in the 1st verse. So in the case of King Nirga, it took this form. In spite of being put into a degraded condition of life, trapped in a well, a huge body of a lizard not being able to move, he says, I simply thought of you, my dear Lord, and my memory was never vanquished. So he certainly kept up that connection with Lord Krishna. So hence he was able to remember everything that had led to his being in this condition. And Srila Prabhupada explains it this way. It appears from these statements of King Nirga that persons who follow the principles of fruitive activities and derive some material benefits are not very intelligent. So this is Srila Prabhupada's comment. On the whole, he had not developed Krishna consciousness. This is Srila Prabhupada's comment. The Krishna conscious person develops love of God, Krishna, not love of pious or impious activities. So Srila Prabhupada's the extraordinary quality by which the Brahmanas work, of course, Srila Prabhupada's spiritual master, Acharya, but he's stating it very clearly that actually, in the case of King Nirga, it was love of fruitive activities and the material benefits that would be derived from those fruitive activities. So hence he falls into the category of not very intelligent persons. So he was certainly resourceful with trying to resolve the problem when it happened, but there was a paucity of intelligence. And this has to do with not actually being on a Krishna conscious plane. So the Krishna conscious person, Srila Prabhupada, the Krishna conscious person develops love of God, Krishna, not love of pious or impious activities. Therefore, he's not subjected to the result of such actions. So that's the extraordinary thing. By the grace of the Lord, the devotee is not subjected to the reactions of fruitive activities. So that's Srila Prabhupada doing, you could say, a concluding comment on King Nirga and what actually the picture factually is. So there's an interesting statement that perhaps expands a little bit on Srila Prabhupada's comment that sort of summarizes King Nirga's position. And it's Lord Krishna talking, where he says, a man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions, even in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. So that particular verse is Bhagavad Gita 250, Buddhi Yukto Jahatha Jahatiha Ubhe Sukrita Duskrite Tasma Yogaya Yujyasva Yoga Karmas Koshalam. So the accumulation of reactions of one's work, both good and bad, is connected to ignorance of one's constitutional position. Isn't that extraordinary? Just if one understands what one's position is in relation to Lord Krishna, one doesn't get this accumulated pile of reactions, both good and bad. So that's the missing component if one is actually getting the reactions of one's activities, which is the case with King Nirga. He was ignorant in one sense of his constitutional position. That's what it said, because his activities were not done in the consciousness of his constitutional position. So that by the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, one's ignorance can be removed because it teaches surrender to the Supreme Lord. And one becomes liberated from this obtained accumulation of action and reaction, birth after birth. So Krishna consciousness is the purifying process of resultant actions. So that's the important lesson that sort of emerges just through going a little bit through this rather extraordinary situation that this highly pious king had to go through with the fact that he actually had to suffer the result of that one impious act. So if there's any comment, question, further thoughts, expansion on the discussion. Vaishnav Sivananda has something.
Thank you for class, Mataji. My question is there a difference between like what was going on in that time with the king Nega and the situation of karma and how things go on now that the appearance of Lord Chaitanya has happened? Like one specific question that I have is like we have now in ISKCON we have the Mangala Artika, right? Tulsi Puja, and it says that if one circumambulates Tulsi, their sins are destroyed, even the killing of a Brahmana. So I was wondering if there's a difference. Like, I mean, this is just a thought. Like, um, is there a difference now, as far as in compared to back in that time?
Well, I guess that was the crux of the matter, that activities that are done without consciousness of one's relationship with Krishna, understanding oneself as that soul that's acting, performing one's activities for the purpose of serving Lord Krishna, that's what leads to having to collect those resultant reactions, whether they're good or bad. So that doesn't change. That was present in the time of King Nirga. It's present in the present time. So what you're describing, that the worship of Tulsi is such that, the prayer that is stating that one is actually even freed from the sin of killing a Brahmana. But that particular action of worshipping Tulsi, it's in line with a devotional service. So it's acting in the consciousness that one is performing that activity of circumambulating Tulsi Maharani as a spirit soul serving Lord Krishna. So that's the crux of the matter. So there's no change if that consciousness is not there. And that's such an interesting thing. Just not having that understanding of one's constitutional position is what causes that accumulation of the resultant actions of one's work. Yeah. So it's such a little thing. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Mata. I also have similar question. Uh, seeing our identity with relation to Krishna first, before anything else. Before first is my identity with who am I in relationship with Krishna, and then you mentioned that forgetfulness of that constitutional position accumulates material actions, causes us to act on a material platform and accumulate material reactions. But being reminded of that constitutional position, that identity again, having a loving relationship with Krishna, the the reactions, do they go away, or I think it raises us to a platform that it transforms the heart in such a way that we do not get affected by the reactions.
Well, it's uh, the whole mechanism is broken because the mechanism that exists for material functioning is that some work is performed, an action is performed, and there has to be a result for that action or that work. So you have to bear the consequence of the action you performed. And it can be, the consequence can be positive, it can be negative, and you also don't know when that reaction is going to come. It may be in another lifetime. Even in the present time, you're experiencing something like even your situation has to do with that collected, that accumulation of reactions is dictated your present situation. So that mechanism exists, but what breaks that mechanism is actually having a consciousness when one's performing one's actions, that actually one's functioning, performing that action as a soul serving Lord Krishna. So just that consciousness breaks that material mechanism that's there. So in fact, you don't get the material reactions. What you're actually getting is the intervention of Lord Krishna uh, coming to mold things in your life in such a way that you are actually getting closer to him. So it's function, everything functions on a different plane. So even if you have to get something of that accumulated past reactions, it's not the normal material chain. It's rather Lord Krishna intervening and uh, allowing one's consciousness to evolve and grow and expand, and one becomes more broad minded in one's outlook. It's not this narrow world of just thinking that one's controlling everything, one's going to achieve what one wants to achieve on one's terms. It's not that little narrow world. Rather, it's like correctly in perspective. Everything's in proper perspective. One's minuteness, one's actions in relation to Lord Krishna. The action is with the purpose of serving Lord Krishna. So everything's functioning on a completely different plane. I don't know if that's sort of got to where you were trying to go.
Yes, well, devotees have, the past karma, and you know, they have astrological things, supposed to happen, astrological things, but they become devotee. Looks like some things are still there, but has a completely different effect on the consciousness.
Yes, yes, because you're shielded. That's what's making the difference. There's a protective shield for the devotee by virtue of the fact that one is working in relation to Lord Krishna, so hence that protective factor, that protective shield is there. So the experience is completely different. It's not out of the blue, one is struck with the reaction. People, you read about people who suddenly get a great fortune or people who suddenly have a huge accident. So that's sort of out of the blue. But as you're working in your proper constitutional position and things are evolving, you can see the order and the control that's been exercised by Lord Krishna. And one is appreciative that one has space to contemplate everything that's happening. And also one is looking at it from a different perspective. It's a perspective of trying to understand the arrangements that are being made for one to expand one's consciousness, to actually evolve as a human being. It's a completely different perspective. One's in a mode of goodness space. And that's why one does all sorts of supporting activities to keep one's consciousness in the right space. Yeah. So if there's nothing else, thank you very much for your very kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.